I'm the most reasonable, responsible person here in Washington. The president knows this. He knows that he and I can work together. The election's over. Now it's time to get to work.
That was Republican House Speaker John Boehner, or as he prefers to be known, as it says in the Celtic script in his full back tattoo, Mr. Responsible. That was 2 days after, I don't know about the tattoo thing, I made that up. But that was 2 days after President Obama won re-election. The president knows I'm the most reasonable and responsible guy in Washington. And you know, in some ways, John Boehner has proven himself to be pretty reasonable over the years. In June 2002, during George W. Bush's first term in office, congressional Republicans were faced with the issue of raising the nation's debt ceiling. That's essentially the limit for how much the country can borrow to pay for things. And no politician ever likes to raise the debt ceiling. Nobody likes to think the country has to borrow money, but we do. And so in June 2002, when that debt ceiling vote came up, as it inevitably does, John Boehner voted yes. Let's do the responsible thing. Let's raise the debt ceiling. It's the responsible thing to do. 2 years later, November 2004, John Boehner voted to do it again. He voted again under President Bush to raise the debt ceiling. April 2005, at the start of George W. Bush's second term, John Boehner again votes in favor of raising the debt ceiling. No matter how philosophically opposed you might be to borrowing money, however distasteful it is to you ideologically, everybody realizes that as long as we are borrowing money, not raising the debt ceiling, defaulting on our debt would be a very irresponsible thing to do. It would be a disaster for the country. Everybody realizes that. Mr. Responsible himself, John Boehner, realizes that. He says so.
Do you agree with administration officials and other economists that defaulting on the full faith and credit of the United States would be a financial disaster?
That would be a financial disaster not only for our country, but for the worldwide economy.
So defaulting on the full faith and credit is unacceptable to you?
I don't think it's a question that's even on the table.
Failing to raise the debt ceiling is not even on the table. That's what John Boehner said last January. And yet, just a few months later, with that voting record and with that stated understanding of how bad it would be for this country to not raise the debt ceiling, there was John Boehner, leader of the congressional Republicans, threatening to not raise the debt ceiling, threatening default. After decades of voting to raise the debt ceiling, no questions asked under President Bush and under previous presidents, under President Obama, the Republicans decided they were not going to do it anymore. Right around this time last year, Republicans threatened to let the country go into default unless President Obama met their demands. They explicitly recognized that it would cause great harm to the country if we failed to raise the debt ceiling, but then they said they were happy to do that. They were willing to incur that harm, to inflict that harm on the country in order to get other stuff that they wanted. And in the end, those threats from Republicans did hurt the country. For the first time in our history, the United States, because of that brinksmanship, lost our perfect AAA credit rating. Because of those shenanigans, the ratings agency Standard & Poor's downgraded the U.S. credit rating, meaning that we would have to pay more interest on money we wanted to borrow. This is something that had never happened before in American history. And this was not a natural occurrence. This was a choice that one side made to cause that problem after they had decided for decades under other presidents that that problem should be avoided. Here's how S&P explained their decision to downgrade when they made it. They said, quote, "The political brinksmanship of recent months highlights what we see as America's governance and policymaking becoming less stable, less effective, and less predictable than what we previously believed. The statutory debt ceiling and the threat of default have become political bargaining chips in the debate over fiscal policy." Republicans decided in 2011 that they were going to use the full faith and credit of the United States of America as leverage for getting stuff they wanted. And it had concretely negative, unprecedented consequences for us as a country. And now, apparently, this year, the lesson they have decided to take from that experience is we should do that again. It's amazing to me. This is from Politico.com today. Look, quote, President Barack Obama made a demand of House Speaker John Boehner near the end of their first White House meeting on the fiscal cliff earlier this month. Raise the debt limit before year's end. Boehner's response, there is a price for everything. A year after congressional Republicans single-handedly forced the downgrade of the U.S. credit rating, they are apparently gearing up to do it all over again. Speaker Boehner told Obama at the White House that the debt ceiling is, quote, my leverage. Despite having direct experience of how this plays out, despite using the debt ceiling as a bargaining chip last year and knowing what that did to the country, now John Boehner says that he sees doing it again this year as his leverage.
I'm the most reasonable, responsible person here in Washington. The president knows this.
And I will destroy the American economy single-handedly unless you give me something that I want that I haven't yet decided what it's going to be. I will tank this nation's economy. I will lower the nation's credit rating again, thus wiping away tens of billions of dollars of American wealth by my own decision unless you give me what I want, because I'm the most reasonable man in Washington. We can have disagreements on matters of policy. We can disagree on the ideological tales we tell each other about how to get to the best outcomes for the country. We can even disagree about basic values, about exactly what kind of country we ought to be. But the thing you can generally assume about everybody who's in public service is that they're public servants, right? That they want the country to be better off. I mean, no matter how you want to get there, whether or not some people think you're wrong or whether or not some people even think you are dumb or misinformed, there is a general assumption that if you are involved in American politics, that at least means that what you want is a good future for America. You are out to help America, not hurt America. You want America to be stronger and better and healthier. Hurting the country on purpose, when you know that's what you're doing, violates the most basic thing that we think we can assume about why people go into public service, why anybody would go into public service. I think it means that what you're doing can't even be called public service. Now that the Republicans are making these threats again, incredulous Democrats are already starting to talk about maybe there are ways that President Obama could just raise the debt ceiling unilaterally. If the Republicans really are going to do this again, could President Obama come up with some way to do this on his own, just through the executive branch? It is hard to believe that the president would try that, but it is not more hard to believe than the fact that he may ultimately be forced to try it because the Republicans are holding the economy at gunpoint and seem perfectly willing to pull the trigger. I do not know how this is going to end this time, after what happened last time. But, wow, stay tuned.